First, I just want to say thank you to everybody who came out this morning on what is it, Wednesday? Sometimes I lose track of the days. And the more I appreciate all of you being here. And at the end, we'll do like a Q&A. So any of you have any questions, I just want to put it out there that there's no questions that are off limits. So whatever you want to know, I'm willing to talk about, even deeply personal stuff. So.
Hi, everyone. All right, we'll just jump into it then. Carlos, your story is quite extraordinary. Can you take us back to your early years and what ultimately led you down a path that led to a 20-year sentence, 17 of those years served, and 3 in solitary confinement?
Yeah. I grew up with a lot of privilege. My father was a doctor, mother, nurse, went to college, and I went to Catholic school, the ideal life. And I think about that now where I'm at in life and when I work with kids, and Shirin and I have a nonprofit organization where we work with them. And when we work with them, I see something, regardless of what their environment is, I know that there's just one thing that can happen that can change everything. And so for me, that was 12 years old, my father left. And when he left the home, everything just spiraled downhill. My mother went into this really deep depression. She couldn't really take care of me and my sister anymore. My sister got pregnant at 16, got addicted to drugs, and I ran away from home when I was 13 years old. And when I ran away, I knew that no matter what, I didn't want to be home, but I didn't know where I was going to go. And I ended up running away into an environment that was full of drugs and prostitutes and gang members and all that. And the men within that community, they created a sense of brotherhood there because they all had been through similar situations, meaning that their fathers weren't in their lives. So that was like a common connection that we had. And so I adopted the ways of that life, which was becoming a gang member at 14, getting addicted to drugs by 14. I was in and out of juvenile facilities, group homes, YA, running away from group homes, going back to the streets. Inevitably, I was in line with fate, right? Fate, which means that there was only 2 options from that life. And I saw it, but I was so young I didn't even realize it. It was either death or prison. And so by the time I was 18 years old, I was picked up for armed robbery, and I was facing life in prison. I was facing life in prison because in California, if you're a documented gang member, which I was a documented gang member when I was 15 years old, didn't even know it. They just do it. If they can see you hanging out with gang members in the community, they could document you as that. So I go to court, 18 years old, they're saying life in prison for robbery. Didn't even know that was possible. But I realized quickly that, like, man, this is serious. And so for 9 months, I fought my case, was in and out of court. I had a public defender, really wasn't doing much to help me. And one day out of nowhere, the district attorney comes in. He's like, all right, Carlos, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to make this decision. I want to give you 20 years with 2 strikes. I'm 18 years old at the time, so that's more time in prison than I had been alive on earth, just to give you perspective of like my young mind, like imagining that. But it was either that or life in prison, guaranteed. So I took that deal, but I remember when I took that deal, I was standing in court, and I was looking at the clock. The DA told me 5 minutes. The clock was ticking, and something told me to look behind me in court, and I did. And I looked out into the seating area, and there was nobody there. No family support, no friends. All those people that I would have gave my life for in the criminal environment, nobody. And so at 18, I got hit with reality that I'm like, it's me against everything, and I just got to go do this. And so it made it easy to make that decision, and I took 20 years and was on my way to prison. And I hit prison by the time I was 19 with a 20-year sentence, maximum security, level 4 prison in California. First day in there, my cellie teaches me how to make a knife. Second thing, he teaches me how to stitch up a wound if I get stabbed. And the third thing was about pressure points in case I had to kill somebody, because that was the mentality in that world. So I go in and I adopt that lifestyle, and for my first decade, I'm just getting deeper and deeper into that and getting sucked into the prison life, and started to stop thinking about freedom and home and anything better than what I currently had there, and eventually became a shot caller in prison. And a shot caller in prison, for those of you that don't know, is a person who is in control of the prison yard. So meaning that I could tell this person to kill that person, or I had that type of power and authority. Um, and I remember one day sitting in my cell with all this power, and it was just feeding my ego and making me more and more violent. And they knocked on my door and they said, "All right, cuff up. You're going to solitary confinement." And they took me in solitary confinement, and they said, "You're being validated, which means that you be in solitary confinement for as long as we want to keep you." And that was difficult because I had to confront and face everything that I did up to that point. All my regrets, all my pain, my mother, my best friend that committed suicide in front of me when I was 16 years old, my father, everything I had to deal with in isolation alone. And either two things happen, and I've seen it and heard it while I was in there. Either a person commits suicide or they lose their mind. Right? I've never heard of a person like actually utilizing that situation to grow from. And with all the amazing things that happened from that point, I was able to do that. So.
Carlos, solitary confinement is one of the most extreme environments imaginable. What did you discover about yourself and the human mind during those 3 years?
Yeah, I remember I broke. I got to the point where I wanted to end my life, and I even planned it. I wrote a letter to my mom, put it into my property. I knew when they found me dead that they would give my property to my mother, the one person I still had in the world. Even though we weren't communicating, she was still out there, and I knew that she would receive that. And I just wrote her a letter apologizing for everything that I did to her, all the pain I put her through, and I planned to end my life. And there was one opportunity to do that in solitary confinement. It was every 3 days when they bring you out of your cell for a shower. They give you a razor so you can shave, and a correctional guard is supposed to observe you while you do it. But this particular guard, he turned his back because he wanted to give you the respect to not have to stare at you while you showered. And I was going to take advantage of his kindness and use it as an opportunity to end my life. And I came to terms with that. I was like ready for that. And I remember sitting on my bunk in solitary housing unit, and a chaplain was coming down the tier, going from cell to cell, and he had his Bible and he had Christmas cards. And it was crazy because I didn't even know it was Christmas. Like in a world like that, you don't even think about holidays and birthdays. Those things don't even exist. And so I was like, wow, it's Christmas, it's December. And he was walking down, going from each cell, and everybody that he was going to was just turning him away. You can tell. And then I remember I was going to do the same thing. I sat on my bunk, put my head down. He came up to the cell, knocked on the door, and whatever it was instinct. I just, something like told me to look up at him. I looked up at him. He called me over to him. I walked over to him, and it happened so quickly. And like my mindset was like, resist this person. Like, God, where's God at? I don't believe in God at that time. And something propelled me to the door, and I went over there and spoke with him, and he became like the first mentor in my life that believed in me and saw something in me beyond the jumpsuit I had on, beyond the bars that was between us. And so he told me, like, look, I don't know you, but I challenge you to figure out what your purpose is, because you have one. Like, you're going through all this stuff, and you can take this situation and you can give up, or you can do something with it. And so I received the Bible he gave me, and that night I opened it and I read, and the first verse I read was Matthew 7:7-8. It was, ask and you shall receive, knock and the door shall be open, seek and you shall find. And it gave me the little bit of hope I needed to just get through another day. And so after I started reading the Bible, it got me through it got me through those thoughts and ideas of suicide. And around that time, right on the cusp of that, a correctional guard that would walk by every night, late at night, and do count, he stopped by and he saw me reading my Bible, and he called me over, and we started to talk about the Bible and the Word, and he was a believer, and he's just like, I see you reading your Bible every day. I want to help you. I got these other books that I read every night because we can't have phones or any devices back here. I read these powerful books, and I want to share them with you. And he's like, would you be willing to receive them? And he was like, the only thing I ask you is every time you finish it, give it back, and I'll give you another one. And so I said, yeah. And he believed in me too. A correctional guard who I looked at as my enemy at one time believed in me. And the first book he brought me was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And that book was like the starting point of my transformation. And from that point on, every week he would bring me new books, and he did that for 3 years. So I read over 150 books in 3 years, books that people talk about today, powerful books that people are like transforming their lives over. I was reading them in solitary confinement, just me, the author, just like sharing his wisdom and knowledge and understanding, speaking to me, and it just shifted my whole perspective and everything. And so, yeah.
What was the turning point for you when you decided you were no longer going to be defined by your circumstances, but instead by who you could become?
Yeah, and it kind of goes into the other question you asked, which is, what did I learn about like the human beings, right, in a situation like that, and also making the decision that I wasn't going to let that define me. It was the realization that like you don't really know how like strong you truly are until you're put up against it. Like some of you in here may have been through some horrible, traumatic, crazy experiences, right? We all have our own story. We all have our own struggles and pain. Mine is no different or better or greater than anybody else. We all experience that the same way. It just depends on your life situation. So what I realized in solitary confinement was the ability to, no matter how bad a situation is, to get through it. Is if you're willing to look at that situation as an opportunity and not something that's harming you. So when I was in solitary, I realized like, okay, people in the world, they don't have this advantage. For me, it was like it's an advantage for me to work on myself, right? Like people have to get up and go to work and do all these things and take care of their family, and they have all these responsibilities. I'm in solitary confinement 24 hours a day in my cell with books. Like this is an opportunity for me to see like how much I can grow mentally, how much I can grow spiritually. And I did. And I used to tell people it wasn't prison anymore. It was a Shaolin temple. That's what I used to look at it as. And I chose to do that. I chose to shift the perspective on imprisonment and confinement and solitude into a Shaolin temple and an opportunity to grow and develop and become the best version of myself and heal. But I had to make that decision. And so that's what I learned, is that no matter how tough life is, you can make a decision on how you choose to accept what's going on in your life, right? So that was a big shift for me, and it empowered me because I knew, okay, even if I never make it out of solitary, even if I die here today in this solitary housing unit, and nobody will ever get to witness the man that I've become. They'll remember me forever for this criminal and this other person that I was. At the end of the day, within myself, I was proud that I was a different person. And so luckily I was blessed, and after 3 years, I went in front of a committee and I was able to articulate myself to get out, and they let me back to general population.
You walked out of prison with just $200 gate money to your name and had to start over in a new world. What was the very first mindset or principle you leaned on to move forward?
Yeah, I got out after 17 years in prison. When you get out after 17 years or even a day, they give you $200 gate money, they call it, and they say check into your parole officer the next day, good luck. And I get out. When I got out, there was smartphones. When I went in, there was flip phones, just to give you perspective on the change that had occurred in the world. Like I had worked on myself, and I changed within myself in prison, and I earned my way out early. By the way, I got out 17 years. I was going to do full 20, but I earned those 3 years back because I got my degree in prison and did a lot of other things. And so I got out and I tackled that beast, but now I'm in the world and I have to start over, and I don't know anybody, and I don't have a network, and I don't have people. And I go to a city where I don't know anybody but one person who let me sleep on their couch when I first got out because she believed in me. And I had no proof of anything. And so when I got out, I realized the importance of letting people believe in you, letting people be there for you to lean on, letting people, like, receiving their help. You know, when my ego, the old way, was like, I don't want any help. I don't need any help. I could do it on my own. That was my mindset in the old days, and it didn't really get me anywhere good. But as soon as I relinquished that, and I was like, okay, my intention is to do good in this world and to bring my story to the world and to start my business and do all these things, when that was my intention, it made it okay for me to receive the help because I knew that each person helping me was helping me get closer to my mission. And they all had a part in that. And they all are playing a part in helping people. So I learned that is like being okay with receiving help, because when you let people help you, you actually help them. You know, you give them more meaning and purpose in life, right? So that was one of the biggest things I learned, and I continued to follow that, and I've met some amazing people in my life. I'm just so gifted to have.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Many entrepreneurs are scared to start before they feel fully ready. You had almost nothing, but chose to act. How did you embrace imperfect action in the early days of building your brand and company?
Yeah, it was always pushing through the fear. Like, fear will keep you from your dreams. Like, fear will keep you from your best life. Fear will keep you from your life partner. Like, fear will paralyze you. And I know, because I've had plenty of my life was built around fear, and actually fear was the reason why I became a gang member and all that other stuff. It wasn't, even though you look tough, you're really in fear. And so I was able to look back at my life and say, fear didn't, like, operating out of fear didn't lead me anywhere good. So anything else that I'm doing in life that's intimidating to me, like starting a business and getting into business school and even advocating for myself to even think that I was worthy to become that, was like pushing through fear, because I got out with limiting beliefs. I got out in a world where people at my age, when I got out, I was in my 30s, were already successful, had homes and all these different things and businesses. And so like I saw that, and a part of me was like comparing myself to that. Like, why am I not there? Like, you're not worthy of that. But once I realized that the only difference between them and me is that that person worked hard to get to where they're at. They put in the hours that I didn't have, and I can get there too, as long as I'm able to push through these limiting beliefs and these fears that are in front of me. And so that's what I did. And it was literally the first time I spoke was at a church, and the sister, she was a sister from a parish, and she asked me to come tell my story to a congregation of like hundreds of people. I'd never told my story, never spoke. Everything in me was like, don't do that. So I was afraid, I was sweating, I was nervous. Had I not pushed through that, like, I wouldn't be here with you today, because that opportunity opened up so many doors for me, and I kept doing that. And I realized, like, man, like, if I push through all these things that I feel are scary, but within my heart, I know I want to do. In my heart, I knew I wanted to speak and tell them my story, but everything else was like telling me not to. So I pushed through that, and it helped me. And so pushing through fear and operating from your heart and really listening to it and making the decisions based on it is really what's going to get you to the next level, and is what's been helping me throughout my entire journey as an entrepreneur.
You've gone from incarceration to being an author, speaker, and podcaster. What role has storytelling, your own and others, played in helping you build trust and credibility in business?
Yeah, well, stories transformed my life. The books I read in solitary were the stories and the perspectives and the ideas of amazing people. So I knew there was power in that, because when I read Nelson Mandela and I read about his story, I was like, that's just another man like me. I could do that. And he empowered me, and I never met the guy. Like, and that was it was hundreds of people that did that through their work. So I was like, okay, I can become that person. I can write a book and tell my story and my journey and what I've learned and share it with the world. And so being able to tell stories through my books and through my podcasts and through speaking and all that is just me paying forward what was given to me, right? And I tell everybody when they're building their brand and trying to establish themselves, like, you have to really be comfortable with being vulnerable and sharing like the things that you're going through, connecting with your authentic self and expressing that through your business or whatever it is that you're doing. And that's what I do with my work. And everything that I do is it's a piece of my life, a piece of me and all the people that I learned from. And people connect with that. People connect with that when they hear about your story and they hear about things you've been through, because they can relate to that. That's another human being. Like, I just did a training for a company. I do leadership development for large companies. And one of the guys, he was like, the most powerful thing about this training compared to every other training was your ability to open up and talk about your experiences. I connected with that. That resonated with me. And so that's the difference. It's like your brand is an extension of you. It's a part of you. And so through all the work I'm doing with my books and speaking and podcasts, it's just me doing that and through those outlets.
Entrepreneurs constantly face the tension between ambition and staying aligned with their values. How do you personally walk that line, and how do you advise others to do the same?
Yeah, well, the values are the principles in which you should make day-to-day decisions. So whatever those values are for you or your company, if you're running a company or whatever, your values should be like the driving force that you live by every single day. So you really want to early on to figure out what those values are. And for me, I figured that out in prison. And I knew who I was. I had my own personal values for myself, my personal mission, and my personal vision. My life was like a business before I even started one. And so I understood that if I followed that within my life, that I would be successful. So when I started my business, I just applied the same concepts that, all right, I want to have a strong values within our culture, but then also be able to have maintain myself as a leader within that culture to continue to push and make sure that we're sticking to our values. We're following our mission every day, and we're staying focused on our vision. And the vision is something that you aspire to do. You may never if my vision is to change the world, I may not see that in my lifetime, but the idea that we're pursuing that daily is motivational for you and your people. And so when I started my business, I made sure that my vision, mission, and values were really solid. And I made day-to-day decisions based on that. And I didn't get persuaded and pulled in different directions by things that didn't align with that, because I always asked myself, okay, does this partnership, or does this person that I'm bringing into my life, or does this person that I'm hiring, can they align with my values? And so you have to be really disciplined in that, because in a world where there's so much going on, you can get pulled in multiple directions and feel like this is the greatest opportunity for me because of materialistic gain. But if it doesn't go in line with your values, it's going to hurt you in the long run. So you have to be really, as a leader, you have to be really disciplined in that and maintain that focus.
Community seems central to your journey. How did you intentionally build a community that believed in your vision, and what advice would you give founders who are still searching for theirs?
Yeah, community is so important to me. Like I said, I got out, I didn't know anybody. I had to start over and build my whole networking community from scratch. And, for me, it was volunteering. It was like the biggest thing I could have done with my life, because, I was going in there with the intent to help people, kids and formerly incarcerated, and even in the church community. It was just all about me being of service, giving, not like feeling like I owe anything or that I'm expecting anything. It's just being of service. And when you put yourself in environments like that, you're going to connect with people, and that's how you build your community of people, because you guys are all pursuing something with the intent to help. And at the end of the day, we're all here to be of service. And whatever you do in life, whatever walk of life you have right now, whatever business you have, in some way you're serving others. And so for me, it was starting volunteering. And then once I volunteered, I had to proactively build and foster relationships and create them and develop them. And that was, again, going back to pushing through fear, because a lot of times it's like people say, man, I'm lonely and I don't have anybody, or I don't have a network, I don't have a community. But the only thing that's keeping you from that is the fear you have within to go out there and find it. And so I knew that it was going to be difficult for me to have to connect with people and tell my story and hope that they don't judge me from that and they give me an opportunity. I knew that, but I also realized that as long as I know that within myself today I'm a different person and I have different skills and things that I can bring to the relationships that I'm building, then it's okay for me to say that I've made mistakes in my life. And so building a community and starting with nothing is really just about you doing the work first, being willing to give and be of service without expecting anything, and you'll find amazing people. And so that's kind of been my philosophy for my community.
Starting from nothing, you had to learn how to scale both your mindset and your business. What lessons can startup founders apply today from your journey?
Yeah, there's so many different things, but and we all heard surround yourself with great people. Obviously, you want to be around great people, great energy. people who believe in your vision, but also people who challenge you and stretch you and push you to question some of the stuff you're doing, because and you have to be willing to receive that. That's all important. Being a lifelong learner, educating yourself, especially like it's funny because I didn't even know how to, set up an email when I got out of prison. And by the way, I got out of prison 4 years ago. I didn't even know how to set up an email when I got out of prison. And now I'm like teaching people how to use AI. And so the idea of like just that, no, the only person that's going to put limitations on you is you. And so that mindset, if you maintain that and you know that like if there's an opportunity that you feel like may be too big for you, you should probably pursue that, right? Because you're far better than what you think you are. And so I have to constantly tell myself that when I'm getting these great opportunities and and things are happening so quick in my life, when they come to me, I have to be willing to talk to myself and say, okay, this is intimidating. You may not feel like you can do this, right? You may not feel like you don't have the experience. You have the experience for this or the education for this, but I'm not going to let that. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to learn it. I'm going to push through it. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to do everything I need to do to be successful in that. And when you maintain that mindset, you'll find yourself like growing so fast and developing yourself, your business, your network. But like I said, the one thing that's going to keep you from that is you. It's not. It's because I got out of prison with no work experience, tattoos, ex-con, former incarcerated. Literally had nothing. Only thing I had was my education, right? And I didn't go to an Ivy League, but I educated myself so hard because I knew that was the one great equalizer of life, right? It didn't matter where I came from, what I looked like, what I believed in. Education was going to give me a shot at my hopes and dreams. And so I just continued to maintain that. And a part of that education is self-development. And that's where the mindset part comes in, because you want to know yourself better than anybody, and you want to be able to make those tough decisions, feeling like, okay, I know I need to work to get through it, but I can. Just not yet, but I can.
As someone who has lived under extreme pressure, what advice would you give leaders about staying grounded when stakes are high and uncertainty is everywhere?
Yeah, staying grounded is just going back to, like I said, just being really clear on what you ultimately want to accomplish in life. That's the first piece of advice I give to any young person I work with or go mentor is like, man, as soon as you can, figure out what you want to ultimately accomplish, and without any limitations, whatever that is. Because it may be something that's going to take a lot of time to get there and a lot of work and effort and education to get there, but it's possible, right? Just the idea that it's possible should be enough to pursue it. And you'll figure out along the journey if that's truly what you want and truly meant for you, but you have to start and you have to have an aim in life. And so it's just, as a leader, you have to figure out what you ultimately want to accomplish within your life personally, right? Within your professional life, right? And just really every single day remind yourself of that. Be clear on that, because then when you go through life and you're trying to build and grow toward that what you want, you'll know like how to say no to certain things and how to say yes to certain things. And everything you say yes to, you say no to something else. And so it's like you have to be very, very strategic on that. But the way to do that is to be very clear on what you want to accomplish, right? And don't put limitations. Because I tell you, like, if I would have put limitations on what I could be, I would have done the things that they told me that I could only do when I got out of prison, which is get a job in a warehouse, the oil refinery, or be a truck driver. Those were when I got out of prison, everybody in prison and when I got out was like, that's your only path to success. Face it. I just refused to face that. But if I believed that and I put that cap and limitation, I would never be able to like be fulfilling my purpose in life. I would have never got to where I'm at. And so you have to really figure out what you want, and then stay every single day. Remind yourself of that and make day-to-day decisions based on if that aligns with your ultimate objective.
Perfect segue to our last question. You often talk about purpose and turning pain into power. For those in this room, many of whom are chasing big goals, how do they reconnect with their why when the noise and pressure of business drowns it out?
Yeah, I'm all about turning. So a wise man once told me that fear comes from pain, right? And fear keeps you from your 2.0 version of yourself, your best self. And so everybody's been through pain. Everybody's experienced some level of it. But that pain can truly generate power within you and in your life and in your business or whatever you're doing. And the reason why I know this is because all the things that I went through in life, all the pain that I experienced, as much as it like hindered me through life, and it's still hard to talk about some situations that I deal with, all that pain, me being able to talk about that and be vulnerable with myself and be vulnerable with others, all that pain is helping another human being in life, right? It's helping them in some way. When I wrote my book, The Price Method, it's talking about that. The subtitle is Turning Pain into Purpose. And it was like looking at my whole life and everything that I had went through and saying like what valuable lessons and what valuable things that I learned along that journey that I could then share with others so that if they're going through that, they can get through it. Or before they even get to that point, they can learn something. And so your pain can actually be the fuel to help you to achieve success. And for me, that's what it's really been. And so pain can be translated into power. And I think about all the people, all my friends and stuff that passed away tragically and at a young age. Like that pain now, every single day I walk around with this on my neck. So this ring belonged to my best friend who died when he was 19 years old. I was 16. And he was more than a best friend. He was like my brother. He helped me survive the streets. He taught me everything I needed to know to survive in the street life that was so new to me. But every day I take him with me. Like I take that pain with me in my work, and it fuels my passion to do what I do and to push through the fear, right? Because fear is not easy to get through, but pain can help you push through it if you choose to look at it in that perspective. And so as painful it is to lose Chris, like a lot of times when I'm feeling fear, I think about this and I think about him and that he didn't get an opportunity to get here where I'm at. And if he was here, what would he want me to do? And it helps me push through things. And so that's how you can transmute pain into power and purpose. And, just as people in the world, everybody here has the ability to impact the world in some way. Either you're going to do it in a negative way or in a positive way. And whatever you do, it's like just understand that if every day you approach life with gratitude and always looking to help people in some way, you'll find happiness. So even before I had anything, like any materialistic anything, I was just so grateful every day for my freedom. And every day I was like, how can I help somebody? And through that, before I had anything, I was really happy and at peace. And I've maintained that as I've grown as an entrepreneur and within myself. And so, just be of service to others. Right? Always try to help people and be grateful for at least one thing every day. I think that really helps you be grounded. And it's not overly complex. It's simple, but sometimes there's a simple answer to a complex situation. So, yeah.
Thank you, Carlos, for that powerful conversation.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So now I want to just, whatever time we have left, we could do Q&A. Any questions? If you guys have any questions, whatever. I know there's a lot there, so whatever
Hi,
comes to mind.
Carlos. Thank you so much for your inspirational, authentic self. It really resonated with me and knowing that I'm on the right path. My question to you is, what is the one fear you have currently that you need to push through right now?
Good question. I love that. It definitely in my personal relationship, with Shirin, my partner, and she's my my thought partner as well. And so when I got out of prison, I never wanted a relationship. I was like, I'm just gonna get out, work, build my life, and worry about that later. And along the journey, I was like, okay, I'm going to keep doing that. And all of a sudden, you know, like an amazing person comes into my life and helps me to like elevate in so many different ways. I didn't even know it was possible for me to even have an amazing person like Shirin. And so it's just me, and she's helping me do this. It's the fear I feel like I have is getting through all of the trust issues that I have developed in my life from the women in my life, in my past, meaning my mother, right? For one, who, you know, I ran away when I was 13. She never came to look for me. So that feeling of that my mother wasn't there for me during that hard time. The first woman that I slept with was a prostitute when I was 14 years old. She took my virginity, but also taught me the streets and was like, don't trust women, just use them to your advantage. And then going into prison and being around all these men who throughout their journey were like, don't trust a woman because a woman will never be here for you long-term in prison. And they were like, I was married and she was gone after 2 years. Or so I'm constantly being fed this idea of not to trust a woman at a young age. And so for me, it's like I know as an adult man now, it's like kind of limiting me from completely opening myself up and trusting in another person, specifically a woman. So, but me identifying that is like, okay, I got to work through that. You know, I have to try to push through that because if not, I'll limit the amount of love that I can receive from a person. And so that right there is one of the fears that I'm working through. And you have to find an incredibly understanding person that's going to help understand that and help you get through that. But then you know that that's your person, right? Because they see beneath that they know there's something there and they're going to help you get there as long as you're willing to receive the help. Yeah. Thank you.
Carlos, I'm really inspired by how much transformation you've seen in the past 20 years. And you're talking about the power of transformation and what it is to be able to seek education to be empowering yourself. I'm curious about how you changed the prison, like from you just being that transformation yourself. I'm a strong believer about like cultivating our environments, and I'm curious about what that looked like for you.
Yeah, so a part of it is when I got out of solitary confinement after 3 years, I went back to general population, and I was still in general population for 4 more years. So I got out of solitary confinement with this new mindset. And before I went in, I was a completely different person. I was a shot caller in prison. I was in gang life and all that. So when I got out, I knew that I had to confront and put myself out there and say that I'm done with that life and I'm going to change my life. And that was another thing, another scary thing. And fear was like, don't say anything, just try to like avoid it or man, you know, just pretend. It was all these different things. But I knew, I was like, okay, I was willing to like die for something else. This system that was created in this gang, I was willing to die for that. So now I got to be willing to die for this new renewed self of mine. And so I went out there and I told the people that were in charge of the yard, like I just no longer wanted to be a part of that life anymore, and I was going to get my life together. And they're like, okay. And I ended up getting stabbed twice. And you know, obviously I survived that, but it really just empowered me. And it empowered me because I knew that the old me would have wanted to retaliate. But in that moment, I didn't feel that anymore. I didn't have those feelings of wanting to hurt anybody else. And so that's when I knew that it was really, really real. And then now I need to bring it to others. And so I remember I went to the chapel. I went to the chaplain, asked him if I can use the chapel every Tuesday to start doing my groups. And I started to share what I learned in solitary with the other men on the yard who were mostly all lifers. So I would go to these guys who were life sentences. They had life sentences. I knew they were already fully in that world, but they wanted to change. I could sense it. I could feel it through our conversations. And I would challenge them to come into these groups, and we'd start doing these groups home, developing insight and understanding. And I started to see the transformation in them as well. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of is that some of those guys that were in those initial groups are out in this world free now doing amazing work. And just seeing them is just like something that's so powerful. And one of the guys who came later on in one of our in groups and network is sitting right over there in the back, Bryson. You know, Bryson is just it's crazy. He's been out of prison, what, like 3 years? 2 years. Prison is 2 years. He did what, 15 years or something? 15 years in prison. But him and I, at those last stages when I was in prison and when he was too, we would get together in these groups and develop and build each other. We would help each other. We would guide each other, mentor each other. And there was a time in our lives, me and Bryson, we would have saw each other on the street. We probably would try to kill each other. That was the mindset. And so to see like their transformation was my way to be able to realize I had something special that I could bring to the world. And so I started my business, which is built off of that. And so, but I go back into the prisons too, still to this day, and I speak to them, and I do workshops and all that too. But yeah, I'm a firm believer in not forgetting where you come from. Don't just walk away from it, but try to go back and make it better. So, yeah.
I feel so inspired by your story, so thank you. And I'm curious, what are your favorite mindset tools and practices when you are coming up against resistance and kind of meeting your growth edge and working towards your next goal?
Yeah, man, I would say the biggest is working with this great man right here, Dan. Dan is like, he's a I would say spiritual coach, mentor, therapist, whatever you want to call it, but he holds space for me and helps me to work through like all of the things that I've dealt with from my past and present. And so like allowing yourself once again to receive help, right? And finding the person that you connect with to work through things that we're going through. And so, me and Dan, we meet regularly for sessions, and we just sit there and we talk and we go through different things in my life, and he helps me to like rewire my brain. And so, having a great mentor and coach or whatever in your life is a huge part of it, and which is why I do the work I do, and being that too for others. I know the power of that, and also, just the basics like you would think, like meditation. I think meditation for me is like a discipline, because my mind is always racing and wanting to do things, and I got so much going on. I'm so busy. By me actively meditating, it's like I'm telling my brain like, stop. I'm in control. You're not in control. And it's very powerful when you do that, because then you steer your life. You don't let your brain run you. You're in control of it. So meditation, and I also would say, like for me, it's being open to pushing yourself through uncomfortable things. So the more you push yourself through uncomfortable things, in your brain, it helps rewire it it helps it grow and develop and rewire itself, because you're actively telling yourself that, okay, this is hard, I don't want to do it, I'm scared of this, like an ice bath or something, right? Like cold plunging is similar. Like you don't really want to do it, but by doing it and pushing through it and getting through that, you're growing, right? Your brain is growing and developing. So those type of things are what I do as much as I can. Yeah.
Hi. So I had a question about your radical honesty in terms of just coming forward with, the past, not because we want to stay in the past, because obviously we don't want our narrative to control who we are, which you haven't done, and you've built something beautiful for yourself. What would you say to those founders out there, because let's just be real, I've met a few, that feel like they need to hide that information from VCs and investors, and it ends up backfiring on them? How would you tell them that to be honest about that and to just go forward and show these people that you've changed?
Yeah, it's understanding that like everybody has a past. I've met so many people that you would never think it, that feel comfortable first time telling me that, man, I did something when I was younger that could have landed me in prison, right? And these are people that you would never think that. But me opening up about my story creates that space for them to open up and even say that and release that, release it from what they've been holding in, let that out. And so it's like as a founder, you're a leader. And so you should be comfortable with talking about things of the past, because that that's not who you are now, but that by doing that, you can actually help other people connect with you more, and you can help people to be comfortable with talking about their past, and I feel like everything that I went through in life, all of my experiences, the things that I'm not proud of and the things that I can't ever take back, all the people that I've hurt, I can never make up for that no matter how much good I do in this world, but I could always be a living amends, right? So it's coming to terms with no matter how much guilt you have for the past, or if you were a quote unquote bad person or horrible person, or people labeled you that, or you were a criminal, or you did things it's like understanding that still has power over you if you're not willing to say that I did that and own that, and it was a mistake, and I choose to do different today, and I won't allow that to happen again because I'm working on myself. That's powerful when you have somebody, especially a leader or founder, being willing to say that, like that I've made these mistakes, I made these errors, but I don't want to be remembered for my worst act. I want to be remembered for who I am now. I want to push past that by showing up every single day and being the best person I can be. So a lot of people get stuck there because they carry the guilt of that, but you have to let that guilt, you have to relinquish that. And then a large part of that is being able to be open and admitting to it. It's like AA, NA, right? It's like willing to admit that you're an addict. That's the first step, right? So it's the same thing with our past, being willing to admit that, be open, and then knowing that doesn't define you, that was your past self. That's not who you are today. Mm-hmm.
All right, and then our final question will come from lovely Gary over here, but Carlos and Shirin will be sticking around for questions and to continue the conversation.
I seem to always get the last question, so I just feel like you can actually answer this one. Sorry. My name is Gary. I feel like you can actually answer this one. I grew up with the early gangs in the Valley, the Bloods and the Crips, back in the 70s. Uh-huh. So I knew a lot of those people. They were friends. I was never part of it. We live in a really charged place right now. You lived in a microcosm for over half your life, it sounds like, which is a small country, right? That's what a prison is in many ways. And you did the hardest thing possible. You took people who are on opposite sides of whatever the equation was, and you took the boldest move, and you obviously influenced people, and I'm sure you influenced the other direction. And they're all here, many of them are here for you today. We live in a really politically charged world of right and left, where people are using both religion, and I'm pretty religious too, but we're in using religion and on both sides demonizing it. You took and found, I find religion to be contemplative. It is kind of meditative in certain places. How do you see today's society, and if you were anywhere from president to a motivator like you are, how would you bring people back toward the middle and make it okay to have conversation, make it okay to see things differently and find I think we're only 5% apart. We all want certain things. How would you pull it back together if you had that stage, which you're certainly building?
Yeah, I think from working in different companies and cultures and stuff, like large companies like Google, where it's like so many people, you realize the power behind leadership. And not just like the CEO, but I'm talking about like all of the people in leadership roles. So it's just no one person can change, a culture or a world or a nation or a prison or whatever, or a community like this. It's not going to take one person, but that one person can inspire other great leaders to help pursue the mission, like the goal. And so for me, it's like when I was in prison, and this is kind of like a smaller example of, if you looked at it like that in comparison to, like, say, the president in prison, it was identifying those people that I knew that would be great leaders. They just needed to develop it, believe in themselves. They needed some help, but I knew they'd be great leaders. And then getting them to pursue this mission that we have, being connected to that mission, and then going and bringing other people that they connect with toward it. So between me and Bryson, like, there's people that in his community, right, his side of the street, that I couldn't go walk in there and do anything. They won't even hear me out because of, my tattoos or something. But by me finding Bryson, right, and working with Bryson and connecting with him and building with him and understanding that we have influence over the world, our small worlds, Bryson being able to go back to his community and bring them along with him and finding those other leaders within there. So it all goes back to like just finding great leaders to support you along that journey. So in the world we live in today, there's a lot of bad leadership. I mean, it's just the truth. These people are not good leaders, right? They could have a lot of money, they could have influence, they could have all these things, but deep down, they're not good leaders. And that's why I'm big on like conscious leadership. I truly feel like we're in this day and age where like we're shifting into this like consciousness on a global scale. And Eckhart Tolle talked about it a long time ago, and he still does and stuff. And we're actually partnered with him and his organization, so it's such a blessing. But like I truly feel that like that's kind of where we're going in the world, and it's going to take conscious leaders to help with that shift. So me as a conscious leader and associating myself with others, and us creating these companies that are changing the world. I just did a program on human-centered leadership at a company to 15 different leaders, and those leaders are going to take what they learned back to their teams, right? And then their teams are going to take that, and then eventually you change a culture. So the world needs to be, United States and the world needs to be like that. You got to have those foundational principles of truly human-centeredness and also consciousness, and then bringing it down to those that you can connect with, and then inspiring them to bring it to those. So it's like a ripple effect. Right. So it's understanding that it's not going to take one person. It's going to take a collective. And everybody in this room has the ability to become that person, that one person that could then inspire others to do that. And then that's how you ultimately, after time, you shift things and you change things. And so all I know is every day I show up trying to just plant my seed and play my part in that. Maybe I don't see it in my lifetime, but I don't think about that. I just think about day for day how I show up and everything, all my relationships, all my friendships, all my interactions with people. And if all of us did that and we're conscious of that, that would change everything, I feel. Yes. Really appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. Shirin and I will probably be here for a little bit. And we also do work with the youth. If any of you want to volunteer, get involved with the programs we do, you can get our information. We have some cards here. We do amazing work with former incarcerated, the youth, but also in my business as well. Everything we do is to try to help people. So if you're interested in that, just let us know. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming to the Kin. We have just enjoyed Carlos and Shirin so much. Carlos, you are such a wise, thoughtful, and just genuine person, and it was such a joy having you here.